Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. Delivering Miracles is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families like yours and mine. Download the free network app on any Apple and Android devices and listen to your favorite episodes on the go. Before we get started, I wanted to share something really exciting. For the first time ever, there's finally a book specifically for women with high-risk pregnancies and how to manage your stress so you can have a healthy pregnancy even if you've got complications. It's called Pregnancy Brain, and I'm really excited to share it with you. To learn more about the book, head over to pregnancybrainbook.com. That's pregnancybrainbook.com. I can't wait for you to check it out. Have you ever found that you like to just talk and share about what you've been through or what you're going through right now? Maybe you don't love it to the extent that you want to talk about it all the time, or maybe you do. But do you ever have this feeling like, hey, I wish somebody asked me what fertility treatment was like, or I wish somebody would talk to me about what my loss experience and mourning my losses have been like, or I wish somebody would listen to me as I shared how hard bed rest is or how challenging it is to be in the NICU. It's very, very normal to want to talk about these things. It's also very common to hide from these realities because they're so hard to talk about. But underneath it, for so many, there is this desire to talk. There's this desire to share what we're going through. And it's scary because you never know if the person on the other end is going to get it, if they're going to be helpful, if they're going to be supportive. And you put that risk out there. You take that risk when you put it out there. But there's this innate need for so many people, I would actually venture to say for most people, if not all people, to share our stories. And it's really just us who get in the way when we don't, when we hide from them, when we say, oh, they don't matter, or, oh, I don't want them to be there, or I don't want to talk about it, or, oh, it's in the past, I don't want to go there again. But innately, there is something in our biology, in our brains, and in our bodies that is meant to thrive on storytelling. And if you look back to history, if you look back to the centuries of human civilization, that we've been here on this earth, storytelling has been a tremendous part of that. Even before written language was created and developed, it was through stories that we learned, that we shared customs and traditions, how we shared family values, and how we shared the rules of society. And to this day, we still rely on storytelling. It shows up in advertisements. It shows up in magazine articles. We love those exposés, whether it's about celebrities or the average person next door and what they're going through and what they have survived or what they are doing. We love stories. And one way that storytelling is tremendously powerful is when you go through a trauma. Infertility, pregnancy complications, prematurity, loss. They're all varying types of trauma. And when it's over, in the sense that the events are over, it's really hard to make sense of them. I mean, how many times have you had a situation when it came to your health where you're like, why is this happening? How does this make sense? Why is this test result coming like this? Why are my contractions not stopping? How does it make sense that this baby is in the NICU fighting for her life when I would give anything to be in her place? It's hard to understand why things happen, and it's really hard to make sense of them. A great quote that I actually just read recently perfectly captured this. Sometimes reality is too complex. Stories give it form. And that's exactly the power of storytelling as a way to heal from trauma. It's not about telling the same story over and over and over. That's not what this is about. It's about using the story to help you heal. And when you do it right, with the appropriate tools and the appropriate guidance and the appropriate support around you, it can be tremendously powerful in helping you heal from the reproductive trauma of building a family. And what I want you to take away from today's episode is to not hide from your story anymore. Whether it's because you're telling yourself that you shouldn't talk about it anymore, you should be over it, or you feel like you don't have anyone in your life who could listen to it or would want to listen to it, or you just don't want to go there, whatever it is that's keeping you from embracing your story, or maybe it feels too hard, it feels too overwhelming. Whatever it is that's keeping you from embracing your story, don't hide from it anymore. Build the story, create it, own it, and share it, because it is a tremendously powerful way to heal from the trauma that you have gone through. There's so much research that supports this as well. So much about the impact of storytelling on your brain, on your body, on your health. There's research on how storytelling, even if the topic is hard, ugly, messy, it increases happiness, peace, and resilience, all of which you need to heal from trauma. But I know it's hard to do. And I hear this all the time with my postpartum clients. I mean, I hear it from my fertility and my pregnant clients as well, but especially from my postpartum clients who are on the other side. There is a baby, and there's so much desire to share the story. I had a client who had experienced multiple losses and then went on to deliver preterm, had a 32-weeker. So was in the NICU for several weeks, and her baby came home, thankfully. But there was so much there. And the support around her, by the time the baby came home, everybody's saying, well, it's over. She's fine. Look, she's healthy, which is a whole other story, right? If you're a preemie mom, you know prematurity doesn't end just because the baby comes home, right? You're very familiar with that. And if you're not a preemie mom, there you go. There's a little nugget for you for today. Prematurity does not end when the baby comes home. It doesn't necessarily end at 2 years old. It doesn't necessarily end ever, actually. And what she told me when she reached out for postpartum support. She was just really struggling with how to release the trauma. And a bulk of really like 98% of the work that I do is very physical, very body-centered. But there's a storytelling element to it because it's important. It's an important part of healing. I'll never forget the very first conversation that we had when she reached out for help. I always talk to my clients first on the phone just to make sure we're a good fit, make sure I answered all their questions. They know what they're getting themselves into. I'm the right person to help them, all that. And on that call, she said, all my friends are getting together with their babies and they're talking about their labor stories and their delivery stories. And I can't do that because I had an emergency C-section. I never went into labor. The baby had to be cut out of me. I don't have a story like that, but I have a story and I want to talk about it. And I feel like if I talk about it, it's going to be so dark that everyone's going to stop talking and they're just going to walk away. And it wasn't a fear that was based in her head. It was that she'd created in her imagination. It had happened to her when she started sharing some of her story with people in a social environment. It's hard for people to take. And so she felt very silenced. And that really hit home for me because I really could resonate with that. That is something that I, to this day, still struggle with. I want to talk about it in social settings, and especially when we're in this phase of life where everybody's having babies and talking about the process of what was labor like and how long were you in labor and did you do an epidural or not, or what was it like and all this stuff. My story doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. I've been living my life long enough to know that my story doesn't fit in situations like that. And it's hard. And I could really empathize with her about the feeling that she shared of feeling like she was silent. She couldn't talk about her story. And yet she could feel this pull, this really strong pull to talk about it because it's real. It happened to her. Forgetting about it, not thinking about it, pushing it aside, changing it, that's false. That's not what she went through. That's conveniently rewriting history to completely lie about what happened. No, it wasn't easy. And one of her goals was really to be able to talk about what happened. And, her ultimate goal is, of course, to heal from the trauma, but she wanted to feel like it was okay to talk about. And while the acceptance of the story from others around her was important, and you can't, you learn very quickly who you can share some things with and who you can't. You learn that at a very young age, right? There are certain things you can talk to certain people about and certain things you stay away from. And as you get older, that becomes even more apparent, right? We all have the friends who we don't talk about religion or politics with, or we all have the friends where we have the slightly more superficial conversations and the other friends who we can really go deep and really say, hey, I'm not doing okay today. Whereas we've got the other calls, we go, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm doing okay. And like your house is burning down around you, right? We learn that very quickly. So part of it is knowing your audience and knowing who is going to be able to tolerate the story. But the other piece of it is getting yourself to be able to tolerate the story. Getting yourself to be able to tell the story from a place that feels safe. And that's why I do the work that I do in the way that I do it, because it's so physical in nature. My whole premise is that I teach all my clients is you can't do the emotional work until you build safety back in your body. So we do all that work first. We build safety back in her body. We reconnect her with her body. We get her close to feeling like she can trust her body again, because you've got to have that foundation in place. Otherwise, every trigger is going to feel like a hurricane coming through and knocking your house down again. And that re-traumatization is horrible. It is not something you need. It actually can hurt you emotionally, physically for a long time. So you have to go gentle with this. But once we had done that work and we moved on to this idea of storytelling as a tool for healing, so much of it had to come from her being willing to let the story flow. And now that might sound like a contradiction because she had just told me, as I just told you, right? I mean, this was within a span of weeks and months, but I just mentioned a couple minutes ago that she really wanted to talk about it, right? We know we want to, we have the feeling, but when it comes time to sharing, even if it's just with ourselves, we can get stopped up. There's a lot of reasons why we resist the idea of sharing our story. But we want to think of it like a clogged drain pipe, where this trauma has plugged up this drain. And to get the sink working again, you have to unclog the pipe. And so the process, it doesn't have to be fast. You don't necessarily need to share everything all the time or right away. It can be a very slow, gentle process too. And the goal of it is to really release that clog, if you will. And to do that requires, as I mentioned, a level of safety in your body, a level of trust in your body, so that you don't get re-triggered by your own story. You need to be able to feel like you can stand on your own 2 feet and withstand the experience that you're about to go on, the journey that you're about to go on, because you're going to write your story. And it's amazing how much doing that can change your body and your brain, and how much it can change the way, not just that you remember what you've been through, but how you experience what you've been through. It no longer is this thing that happened to me. It's no longer this out of body experience that feels so separate from who you are, that this is who I am. I am strong. I'm capable. I am successful. I am generous. I'm kind. And then I experienced 6 miscarriages, or I have a baby in the NICU. It integrates all those things together so that it is under one umbrella of you, of who you are. There's a tremendous catharsis that comes from that. Just being able to release what you've been holding on to. And as I mentioned, I do the body work first. I know there are clinicians and providers who do just storytelling and narrative therapy and narrative coaching on its own. I just find that especially with reproductive trauma, that safety needs to be built first. Otherwise, you just run the risk of going backwards and hurting yourself. It's more likely than if you dive in just that way. That doesn't mean that it's not effective, though. It provides this level of catharsis, this feeling of unclogging the drain, that finally things feel like they're flowing, that I'm not silenced anymore. I'm not holding myself back. I'm not holding back a part of me because that feels inauthentic. You are somebody who has experienced infertility. You're somebody who's experienced multiple losses. You're somebody who's experienced a high-risk pregnancy. You're somebody who has a baby in the NICU. That is who you are, and hiding that from the world, hiding that from yourself, which ultimately means you're hiding it from yourself, right, to some degree. That's inauthentic, and it actually creates stress in the body to do that. So this is a level of catharsis, both physically and emotionally, to be able to put a story and really put your experiences into story format. And then related to that, one of my favorite benefits, and I think the most powerful benefit of storytelling as a source of healing, is that you put words to emotionally charged experiences. And that's essential to helping your brain make sense of the trauma you've been through, right? When you think about the trauma, there's such a strong emotionally charged reaction. There's often no words that go with it. It's a feeling, right? Like this particular client, when she'd hear the elevator ding, her heart would stop and she'd stop breathing, and the palms of her hands would get sweaty because it would remind her of a sound from the NICU when her daughter was there. There's no words. There's no conscious connection that's happening. It's deeply rooted in her mind and her body. And by when you approach the healing from a storytelling perspective, putting language to that feeling, putting words to those experiences actually helps your brain make sense of what's going on, what happened to you, and how does that fit into the bigger picture of you and your life. The other benefit of this that I love is that it also allows for you to share your story and then be able to step back from it and look at it. And the tremendous amount of empathy and compassion that you can develop for yourself because you hear yourself say the words, or you read them yourself if you've written it down. To hear those words come out of your mouth or to read them on the paper, you almost are able to step back from that, not in a dissociative way, but in a way that allows you to look at it from a different perspective. And you can kind of see then how you'd respond to somebody who had been through what you have been through. And that compassion is so key to healing. We can't heal without it. Believe me, I've tried. It has taken me a long time. I don't want to do that. I just want to heal. I just want to go through it, and I just want to get better. It doesn't work like that. You know that. I know that. We just need to be reminded of it sometimes. So that's really important, tremendously important, as being able to step back and look at it and go, oh, wow, that was a lot for one person to go through in a really short amount of time. You get that perspective that you don't get because you're in the thick of it. You're right there in the middle. So it's hard to see that when you have the story out there. It's much easier to step back and see that. And the other thing, which is really the crux of what's narrative therapy or narrative coaching, is You see the problem as the problem, not the person as the problem. That's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of the catchphrase of that field, if you will. See the problem as the problem, not the person as the problem. And what that means is, and how it relates to reproductive trauma specifically, is we as women, as mothers to be, have such a strong tendency, specifically us, not just us, of course, but specifically us as women, to blame ourselves for the trauma that we've experienced. I am fully guilty of this. It's my fault. I'm broken. I couldn't protect my baby. I failed us. It's my fault that my partner is having to work so much. I mean, all those things, right? All those things. How many of these things have you thought yourself? How many times have you felt like, oh God, if only my body could do this, right? It happens. And by approaching healing from a storytelling perspective, you're able to, again, get some of that perspective to step back and say, hey, it's not me that's the problem. It's XYZ diagnosis. It's XYZ treatment. It's prematurity. You externalize it. There's a time and place for taking responsibility for the things that happen to your family. Reproductive trauma is not one of them. And the beauty of then storytelling is that you have the opportunity to rewrite it. And I'm not saying rewrite it so that it's tied up in a nice, neat little bow and digestible for other people. Not at all. You've still got the real, raw, ugly realities of what's happened to you. You know what it was like to be lying on that bathroom floor when you were miscarrying. You know exactly what it was like to go and be wheeled into the OR screaming hysterically because your baby was going to be born way too soon because of an emergency C-section. Like, you know those details, and those details are extremely important. This is not about rewriting it so it's palatable, but it is about reauthoring it to create a more empowering version of your story. And this idea of what we just talked about, of seeing the problem as a problem and not the person as a problem, is a great way to do that. Building compassion for yourself and empathy for yourself is a great way to do that, where the story that you create is focused on the empowered nature of what you've been through. And I'm not saying it needs to be written in a way where you go me, I'm awesome. But somewhere in the rubble, as there were fires burning all around you and it felt like your entire world was falling apart, there were good things that you brought to that situation that helped you get to the other side. And when you're in the trauma, when you have not yet begun your healing process, you can't see that. I've had so many clients at the beginning of this work who are convinced, I am broken. I'm broken. Look, literally, I've said this too, literally, my uterus doesn't work. My fallopian tube doesn't work. It's broken. I've gotten into so many arguments with my husband in the past about this very concept. I would say to him, when he would push back, I would say to him, what would you call a car that doesn't turn on? Broken. What do you call a fallopian tube that can't bring an egg to meet the sperm? Broken. You really believe it. You really believe it. It feels so real. And it's the power of our thoughts, right? The more we think them, the more our nerves, the neural connections in our brain become stronger and stronger and stronger until it starts to feel like fact. And then we can't distinguish that thought from fact. The sky is blue. I'm broken. It becomes the same thing. And so by storytelling, you actually get a chance to change these neural connections. And so it's not just about how you feel or the words you say. It's about the changes that are happening in your body that allow for the healing to happen. So you might be wondering then, okay, this sounds awesome. How do I do this? It is awesome. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. There are a lot of different narrative tools, a lot of different strategies and exercises. If you Google them, you'll find like 5 million right off the bat. Here's what I tend to recommend. It goes in 3 phases. Okay. The first is journaling. And there are no prompts. There's no question necessarily to answer. It's just free writing, because this phase is all about unclogging the drain, right? We get so used to not sharing the story or hiding from certain parts of the story or not really expressing or going there, if you will, right? So the journaling is just about unclogging. There's no form to it. There's no structure to it. It doesn't really even read like a story, really. It's just to get the clog out. And then phase 2 is composing the story. And this is my favorite phase. This is where I see when we get there with my clients is so much shift and so much just like it looks like the light turns back on. Their faces change, their bodies change, everything just changes because of the benefits that we just talked about when it comes to storytelling. And so, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but this is about composing the story. It's about starting at the beginning, and the beginning is whatever you consider the beginning. And sometimes that beginning changes based on the context. So sometimes, for example, when I share my story of our fertility journey, depending on the context, that starts at being diagnosed with endometriosis. Sometimes it starts with the ruptured ectopic. Sometimes it starts with my high-risk pregnancy. It just really depends on the context, and that's going to be there for you too. So the goal of this is always, in every way, flexibility. That this is not a story set in stone, and this is a story that will change and evolve over time. And a cool way to get this story together is once you decide what the beginning is for you for this moment, right? Maybe your healing really needs to be in everything that's happened in the last 6 months. And that's fine. That's completely fine. You know that that's not your whole story. And it doesn't have to be the whole thing. This is the healing for this portion of it. And that's okay. So you figure out what the beginning is, and you start writing the story. And the story is written like a story. This is not a journal entry. This is a story. I mean, it's written in first person, but write the story. What did you see? What did you hear? Where were you? What was the conversation like? What was the tone of somebody like? What color shirt was your nurse wearing? Like, write the story. Get really creative with this. There's a very powerful healing mechanism in our brains when we allow ourselves to be creative. And that again goes back to step 1, which is that unclogging the drain through journaling. Trauma can actually significantly impair creativity. And if you're a creative person, if you tend to draw or write or sing or dance or whatever it is if you have that in you naturally, you might notice that it's actually really hard for you to go back there. You just can't. Physically, neurologically, chemically, that part of your brain has changed. But that doesn't mean it can't change back. And that's where journaling comes in. You start there and you unclog the drain. You get access to that part of your brain back. And you start writing the story and you compose it like a real story. And it gets you, when you write it that way, it gets you out of your reality, right? It's different than going to talk therapy and talking about what happened. When you write it this creatively, it actually triggers that imaginative side of your brain, that creative side of your brain, which almost acts as like a protective shield against the triggers that you are talking about and that you're going back and it's not reliving. You're not reliving it because of the creativity that's acting as a buffer against that, if that makes sense. And then the third part of that is to share the story. You do not have to share the story with the world. You don't even have to share it with 5 people. You don't even have to share it with 1 person. I had a client who was so nervous about sharing her story. Part of it was nerves because she didn't know who would be able to take it. She was also nervous. We talked even about, okay, well, maybe it doesn't have to be anyone outside the family. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's your mother or mother-in-law or your sister. We tried to find somebody who was extremely close to her, even her best friend. But she just wasn't comfortable with that because it felt so vulnerable to her to share this story, totally understandably. So we got her in front of a mirror and she read the story out loud. And it goes back to several of the points that I made earlier, which is when you share the story, and you don't even have to do it in front of a mirror. You don't even have to look at yourself if that makes you uncomfortable. But you've got to hear the words. You've got to hear the words coming out of your mouth, because then you can hear them from a different perspective. You can gain that empathy and the compassion that you need to help with the healing process. And from there, I work with my clients on how to reauthor their story in a more empowering way. To be honest, there's not a whole lot that I have to do with that, because by the time we've gotten to this place, they can see the spots. You can see it so clearly. Like, oh, wow, this story is so strong. And then I get to this point and it's all self-duration. And that's got to change. And that's got to change. It's almost like you see the ship and you can finally see where there are weak spots or there are holes that you need to plug up to make it a stronger vessel. It's a beautiful, beautiful process. It's slow. That doesn't necessarily mean it takes a long time. My clients are usually not with me for more than 8 weeks. But it takes effort to do it gently. But when you do it gently, you're creating actual change physiologically, chemically in your body that are the steps necessary to actually heal from the trauma. This is not just about talking about what happened. This is about actually creating change in your body. And that change is absolutely possible because your body's looking to heal. It's always looking to heal. It's always looking to function optimally. And the emotional wounds of a trauma, your body recognizes them as something, as a part of you that's not functioning optimally, and that needs to be healed. Just like a cut, a scrape, a bruise, same thing. It's extremely powerful work. And with the right support and with the safety that you build in your body and the trust that you build in your body, it's absolutely possible to get to a place where you remember your trauma in an integrated way, where it's not this separate thing. It's integrated into who you are, where it doesn't define you, but it is absolutely part of your story, and you can recall it from a place of pride, from a place of confidence, without worrying about being re-triggered, without worrying about flashbacks and nightmares and whether you can handle it. And then it doesn't even matter whether other people can handle it, because now, even if you were to share it, when you get to this place, you share it in such a different way because you're not looking to other people to be able to hold this for you, to be able to handle it for you while you figure it out. It's really cool and it's tremendously powerful. It's really, really powerful. And I'm actually thinking about starting another separate guided program on storytelling specifically. Right now, it's just kind of built into my postpartum program, but I was thinking doing something specifically for storytelling as a way to heal from reproductive trauma. So if you are interested in learning more about it, send me an email at info@parijatdeshpande.com, or just go to my website and go to the contact form and just put storytelling in the subject line, and we'll add you to the wait list. And you'll be the first to know when the group is open for enrollment and we have more information about it. But something that I've been toying with is something that I think would be so fun to do. It's just so positive. It's so powerful. It's so empowering. And gosh, after any kind of reproductive trauma, why wouldn't we all want that? Right? So whether you work with me or you want to do this on your own or you work with somebody else, it doesn't matter. Allow yourself the opportunity to really embrace your story. Don't hide from it. but build it, create it, own it, and share it, because it is a really, really powerful way to heal from what you've been through. Thank you so much for joining me here today. This was a really fun episode, and I have so much to say about this. So if you have questions, tag me on Instagram or on Twitter or Facebook, and I'm happy to answer them for you. And if you liked today's show too, I would love it if you can head over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe and leave a review, because the more subscribers and the more reviews we have, the higher this podcast ranks and the easier it is for other women who are going through infertility, loss, high-risk pregnancy, bed rest, prematurity, and are trying to heal after it's all over. The easier it is for them to find it. And they can tune into Delivering Miracles, and they can tune in for the inspiration, the tips, the motivation, the advice that we talk about on this topic of the real raw side of family building. It's not always pretty and easy and simple. We talk about the hard stuff. There's a lot of women out there going through the hard stuff. So I would really appreciate it if you can head over there and subscribe and leave a review and help Delivering Miracles rank a bit higher, and share it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. Tell people about it. And if you haven't yet, you have to check out Pregnancy Brain. That book that I wrote recently is being picked up by fertility clinics, hospitals, the antepartum units in hospitals, doula agencies, OBGYN offices, all around the country, because it's filling a much needed void in pregnancy books. I wrote it because it was a book that I wished I'd had. My pregnancy was not the happy, wonderful, everything will be fine, just be la-di-da. Like, that's not how it was. And if that's not your experience either, or you think it's not going to be your experience, you've got to get your copy. Head over to Amazon or barnesandnoble.com and you can grab your copy today. And of course, I would love to stay in touch. So follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The handle is Parijat Desh for all of them. Parijatdesh. And please do say hi. I would love to meet you, really. An amazing quote by Dr. Daniel Amen says, "We can change our brains. You are not stuck with the brain you were born with." And I think that is very true also of trauma. You are not stuck with the brain that's been formed, created, shaped, influenced by the trauma that you've been through. Your brain and your body are capable of healing, and they want to. They're looking for ways to do that, and storytelling is a fantastic tool to rely on. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.